Zhou Tingting, who was born with great strength, opened her eyes and became the cannon fodder background in the era of Xiaotian Wen. My stepmother and stepsister's stepfather, along with their whole family, were restless and kind-hearted, deceiving her of her job and occupying her room. After squeezing out her last bit of value, she kicked her to the countryside and the original owner tragically died. Later, the father's family became prosperous due to the things left by the original owner. Zhou Tingting. Go to your grandmother's damn plot, she's not the one who's at a disadvantage. Zhou Tingting, the serf, turned over and sang, punching the whole family. All the workhouses have been sold, a report letter has been sent, and the whole family has been laid off. As for my stepsister, you should also go to the countryside and stay with me. Revenge is over, Zhou Tingting. Chapter 1. The Little Poor Man Wearing Books at the Beginning. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This story is just a fiction. Please don't be fastidious, sisters, have a good time. Starting from now, enjoy reading the article with joy in 1976, number 78 Cat Alley Courtyard. Zhou Tingting, get out of here. This is not your home, this is my home. Looking at the arrogant little chubby man in front of her, Zhou Tingting rubbed her painful head melon seeds, but unexpectedly rubbed and pressed the wound. The pain cleared her mind. In an instant, countless memories surged in. She wore books and became the cannon fodder backdrop in Sweet as Honey in the 80s, the silent and bookish stepsister of the female lead. The biggest function is to send jobs and golden fingers. After sending them, they go to the countryside and even die in the harsh conditions of the countryside without even going through the Chinese New Year. The family stepped on the original owner and rose step by step, using the connections left by the original owner's father to live in the house left for her by the original owner's father, just occasionally mentioning the original owner with hypocrisy. Say something like the original owner's fortune is thin. The most chilling thing is the mother of the original owner, Xiaotian. After marrying in, she always asked her daughter to tolerate her arrogant and domineering stepdaughter. You are a drag bottle brought over by your mother. If it weren't for your stepfather giving you a generous bite to eat, you would have starved to death long ago. At that time, the original owner was young and was developed into an introverted personality by his mother Pua every day. He worked as a free nanny for the whole family and was a little recluse. After serving her stepsister and stepfather, and her biological mother gave birth to a younger brother, she became an invisible person and an unknown tool of labor in the family. Of course, it's still the vent at home. Whoever gets upset outside can come forward and give the original owner 2 slaps to vent their anger. Little did they know that the house they lived in belonged to the original owner's father, and even the money they used for daily expenses was saved by the original owner's father. What's even more outrageous is that the stepfather's job was exchanged for that of the original owner's biological father. A large family lay on one person's body, sucking blood, still feeling proud and taking it for granted. I can't think about it. Just thinking about it, Zhou Tingting feels like she's almost breathless. But it's okay, she's here now, and this book can be considered the end of it. Still sweet in the 1980s, sorry, it has been changed now and is called All in the 1970s. She's a stepping stone. I poo. Do your spring and autumn dreams. Before Zhou Tingting could regain her senses, the chubby little man began to shout. I'm talking to you, did you hear me? The little chubby man looked at Zhou Tingting without any movement and was angry. As soon as he walked in and lifted his foot, he was about to kick Zhou Tingting. Can Zhou Tingting get used to him? Besides, those who were originally thin in arms and legs, with just this chubby foot, if it really fell on them, they wouldn't be able to stay blue and purple for half a month. She raised her hand and slapped it. The little chubby guy's face is very soft, and the touch when pulled on it is good, with QQ bouncing. A crisp sound came, followed by Xiaopeng's heart-wrenching cries. Xiaotian was originally cleaning outside, but when she heard the commotion, she stretched out her head and said, "Wow, this damn girl's movie is about to rebel. The broom she lifted didn't even fall on Zhou Tingting's body, and she was intercepted halfway by Zhou Tingting. She casually broke it off with a click. The broomstick, 2 fingers thick and thin, broke. The air instantly fell silent. You're going to rebel. Xiaotian didn't dare to take action anymore. She pulled her son behind her and began her usual pua. You heartless person, don't forget who took you in and gave you a meal. Before she could finish speaking, Zhou Tingting raised her hand and slapped her. Well, this woman has a shoe-pulled face, no flesh, and doesn't feel as good when pulled as little fatty. Xiaotian touched her fiery face, feeling confused. Do you dare to hit me? Yes, Zhou Tingting remained calm. Also, it's you who should get out. The house you live in is left for me by my dad, and you are outsiders. Xiaotian let out a thud in her heart. It's broken. How could this dead girl know about this? Tingting, did you make a mistake? Zhou Tingting didn't want to say anything more, get out of here, otherwise. She lifted her hand and broke off a corner of the solid wood furniture, her face unchanged. Xiaotian. Indeed unable to fight, she gritted her teeth and felt her numb face. There are only 3 people at home now, and from the current perspective, their combat effectiveness cannot match that of Zhou Tingting, who often works. Xiaotian angrily thought, damn it, wait for the movie. How can I clean up you when her man finishes work? Xiaotian gave Zhou Tingting a resentful glance, picked up the frightened chubby guy, and struggled to move out of the door. The door was closed, and Zhou Tingting rummaged through the boxes and cabinets on the original owner's small table for a long time, finally finding the golden finger. A wooden little pichot. She picked up the scissors and slashed fiercely at her hand, blood gushing out in an instant. Zhou Tingting remained calm and pressed her hand onto the body of the little pichot. As the fresh blood was absorbed, Pichot's body shone brightly and disappeared in place in the next second, along with Zhou Tingting. In an instant, she stepped on the ground. The interior of Pichot is a small villa with a courtyard, about 500 square meters. In addition to a few fruit trees, there is also a spring water in the courtyard. Zhou Tingting couldn't help but walk over as she looked at the spring water. When she regained her senses, her hand had already been inserted into the spring's eye, and she took a sip. It was cold and refreshing, and her heart felt comfortable. It seems like a warm current is repairing her limbs. Without time to explore the remaining secrets, Zhou Tingting hurriedly left. As long as she grabbed the golden finger, the rest could be plotted one by one. Just as Zhou Tingting appeared in the room, the door was kicked open. If it weren't for Zhou Tingting's timely evasion, the door could have directly hit her face. Zhou Tingting gritted her teeth and said, looking for death. She didn't give face anymore, and the female lead Xiaotian, who had not yet had time to make her cool remarks, flew out with just one kick. Until she fell and sat on the ground, Xiaotian was still confused. She touched her stomach and said weakly, Mom, my stomach hurts. Watching Xiaotian's miserable situation, a hint of pleasure flashed in Xiaotian's eyes. Zhou Tingting was not a good person, and Xiaotian was even more so. With Xiaotian's favor, she could easily make things difficult for herself. God knows how tired she has been living at home. Now that Xiaotian has been cleaned up by Zhou Tingting, she is happy in her heart, but she is struggling to show it and has to pretend to be worried, approaching her with a hypocritical concern. Xiaotian had not yet stepped in when he saw the mess at home. He frowned and calmly pulled up Xiaotian, who was sobbing on the ground. Then, he casually slapped Xiaotian and kicked her again, it's useless. Then he sat on the sofa and said to Zhou Tingting with a smile, Tingting has grown up and will resist. Just that smile, it's not bottoming out. Zhou Tingting nodded and said, you're right. People can't always be suppressed by animals, right? Her words can be said straightforwardly, as long as Xiaotian is not a fool, he can understand. However, Xiaotian looked at her with pity in his eyes and said, well, you're just a child. You've done something wrong, and I won't argue with you. Besides, you can only be stubborn for these 2 days. After speaking, Shen Jian deliberately paused for a moment, his eyes flickering with malicious light. I have registered for you to go to the countryside. After saying these words, Shen Jian became even more excited. He had already begun to expect Zhou Tingting to be swaying and begging for mercy at his feet, daring to be so arrogant. Are you happy? You will soon be able to go to the countryside to make contributions, contribute to the construction of the country, and make your own contribution. Chapter 2. Crazy in place, equal death for everyone. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Oh, Zhou Tingting was very calm, it was a foregone conclusion. She couldn't change it, but equally, she could also make this family not have a good life. After all, they are all part of the same family. Sweetness belongs to oneself, and disaster must belong to them. Crazy on the spot, equally killing everyone. I feel like you're a bit slutty, and I don't like it. Zhou Tingting was very polite and even used honorific language. May I ask if I can beat you up? What? Shen Jian didn't even have time to react, and Zhou Tingting grabbed his collar, just like a chubby little chick. Grab with one hand and start thrusting with the other. Zhou Tingting roast as she smoked. Nima, this man is very untidy, and she doesn't know how to shave. Her hands hurt when she smoked. Throwing Shen Jian, who was like a dead dog, onto the ground, Xiaotian crawled over trembling and looked at Zhou Tingting with a look of horror in her eyes. Are you crazy? I'm crazy, driven crazy by you. She pointed to the bag on her head, do you see? It was this bastard you gave birth to who pushed me. If it weren't for my fate, I would have died long ago. If you don't go crazy anymore, you'll be laughing. Anyone who is being exploited is fine, she can't do it anyway. Shen Jian's cold sweat trickled down his body, and as he watched Xiaotian not doing anything practical, he raised his hand and slapped him. Are you blind? Why don't you take me to the hospital? Shen Jian is not a fool, he will definitely resist. He is just 1 foot taller than the devil, and his arm was broken by Zhou Tingting's pout. Now my arm is broken, and breathing is an unbearable pain. Xiaotian dared not speak up when she was beaten, wiping her tears and taking Shen Jian to the hospital. Of course, little Fatty and Shen Yuanyuan didn't stay either, and they were afraid of being left alone and being chopped to death by Zhou Tingting. When Shen Yuanyuan left, she touched her heart and reluctantly turned around to look at Zhou Tingting. She felt empty in her heart, always feeling as if she had lost something very important. Everyone has left, and the house is now clean. Zhou Tingting knew that this was not the time to relax. She needed to first figure out what going to the countryside was and prepare everything. However, Zhou Tingting pushed open Xiaotian's room and found the mezzanine where she used to store things. Inside were the room notebook and Zhou Tingting's personal household registration foldable pages, which she had all collected. I grabbed a handful of money and went out to fill my stomach. As for how this behavior is Zhou Tingting confidently thought, can taking something from her own mother be called stealing? She turned back to search for the remaining things, and now understanding the situation is the most important thing. When she went out, the neighbors looked at her with eyes similar to those of monkeys on the street, but Zhou Tingting didn't glance at her and walked out. Having had enough to eat and drink, Zhou Tingting wandered to the street office. Before entering, I saw a mother and daughter holding a thermos outside. The little girl raised her hand to wipe her tears and was sobbing, "Mom, I don't want to go to the countryside." The woman was also worried, "My mother doesn't want to ask you to go to the countryside. If you have a job now, let alone 500 yuan. 800 yuan, my mother will pay for it for you. The key is this job, it has value but no market." Zhou Tingting stopped and waited for 800 yuan to buy a job. "Do you want to buy a job?" Well, the girl remained silent and was still sobbing, with a forced smile on her face. Who doesn't want to buy a job these days? I do, but the price is a bit high. Do you want it? In an instant, the mother and daughter seemed to be hit by a huge surprise. Yes. Can you tell me what kind of job you are? The woman's eyes rolled. The office seat is expensive, but the parking lot is cheap. But no matter what job it is, she has to get her hands on it. First, keep her daughter by her side, and the types of work can be gradually changed later. Sitting in the office, the announcer is very dignified. Zhou Tingting quickly integrated into this era, without blinking an eye or jumping a heart. When it comes to the mother-in-law's family in the future, it will be very popular. That's the truth, but how could she be willing to give up such a good job? Perhaps seeing the suspicion in the woman's eyes, Zhou Tingting shrugged and said helplessly, reorganizing the family, my stepfather has a daughter. Now, in order to grab a job, he has secretly registered for me to go to the countryside. Everything is reasonable now. The woman was very cheerful and said, Cheng, tell me what you want. 800 yuan and 10 industrial tickets, food and cloth tickets, whatever you have, I don't mind. The job of being a broadcaster is really popular, and women are also afraid that after passing this village, there won't be this shop. She grabbed Zhou Tingting's hand and said, Auntie, I'm not playing tricks with you. I really plan to do this business with you. I won't cheat you on the price, just be quick. It would be best to implement this work today. Then I need to see if my aunt's heart is sincere. Auntie left her daughter behind and took her hostage to Zhou Tingting, while she frantically tossed her legs and rushed home. Half an hour later, Zhou Tingting lit the money ticket in her hand and looked at the pile of scattered tickets. Cheng. Let's go to the steel plant now. The announcer at the steel plant, my aunt was so surprised that she was about to faint. Until the red stamp of transferring the job was stamped on the name of her own daughter, the aunt breathed a sigh of relief, and the little girl jumped up with joy. The willows are dark and the flowers are bright, but that's all. If you don't mind, call me Auntie Fengxia. Zhou Fengxia looked more and more at Zhou Tingting now, and for some reason, she would be attracted to a little girl she happened to meet on the roadside. Such a strong liking. Aunt Fengxia, my name is Zhou Tingting. Zhou Fengxia's eyes lit up and she said, oh, you still have the same surname as my mother's family. It's all fate. After leaving the steel plant, Zhou Fengxia held Zhou Tingting's hand and expressed her gratitude. Tingting, Aunt Fengxia really doesn't know how to thank you. If you encounter any problems in the future, you can ask Aunt. If you can help, Aunt is bound to do so. After saying these words, Zhou Fengxia was taken aback for a moment and looked at Zhou Tingting. She said in a casual tone, I have no intention of speaking. Of course, Zhou Tingting knew that people's joys and sorrows were different from each other. Her daughter was able to stay in the city, and her happiness was just right. But can you help me? Zhou Tingting thought of her own house. Aunt Fengxia is fine, it's heartless. To be honest, I really have a favor that I need your help with. I still have a house left by my father under my name. I'm going to the countryside and I don't want to give the house to someone else for a discount. Can you help me find some connections or something? Zhou Fengxia easily retrieved 800 yuan, which didn't seem like a family in need of money at all. It wouldn't be difficult for her to buy a house when the time came. Zhou Fengxia was stunned for a moment. Looking at Zhou Tingting, she felt a bit embarrassed. She was afraid that the house would be old and dilapidated, so even if she wanted to sell it, no one would buy it. Chapter 3. Repaying with Peach Blossoms. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Rich people are not interested, while those who are interested do not have money. Never mind, since it's already here, if it's really not possible, her family will take it down first. Quan Dang helped. Cheng, where do you say your home is? 78 Mao Alley, with 3 rooms and a small courtyard. Zhou Fengxia was taken aback and said, wait, what do you mean by that relatively rich territory? Well, that's what my dad left for me. Come on, there's nothing more to say now, and there's no need for anyone else. Zhou Fengxia took it herself and said, "Take me a look, and I'll take what suits me. I'll leave it for my girl's dowry in the future." Success. When they arrived at the yard, the girls glanced from a distance. The location was good and the orientation was good. The little girl excitedly hugged the aunt's arm and said, "Mom, that's it. This is good. With a yard, I can set up a grape trellis in the yard like my grandmother." Looking at the innocent smile on the little girl's face, Zhou Tingting couldn't help but sigh. A child with a mother is really a treasure. Not to mention that the girl likes it, even Zhou Fengxia has taken a liking to it, and now there is no hesitation at all. After leaving the gate, she went to the Housing Management Bureau, presented the property certificate, and brought the household registration books of both parties. The house was sold for 1,000 yuan in the end. This time, Zhou Fengxia directly applied for a passbook and gave it to Zhou Tingting. Suddenly getting rich and feeling the money, Zhou Tingting still felt a bit unreal, but what she could foresee was that even if she went to the countryside, she wouldn't have to endure too much with just such a large amount of money here to make ends meet. Not to mention having golden fingers. If you go to the countryside, then go to the countryside. Who's afraid of anyone? "Let's go," Zhou Fengxia said, and Zhou Tingting hesitated for a moment. "Where are we going?" Zhou Fengxia smiled and said, "Didn't I just see you wandering around at the Educated Youth Office? Let's go. This time, I'll send the Buddha to the west, and my aunt will also help you." Although she didn't understand the meaning, Zhou Tingting still followed along. As soon as I entered the door, my aunt, who had been sitting leisurely behind the table drinking water, stood up and looked at Zhou Fengxia with a strange expression on her face. "Oh, you busy person, why do you have time to come to my place now?" Looking at the smile on Zhou Fengxia's face, the aunt of the Educated Youth Office felt a bit uneasy. This woman wouldn't have gone crazy because she knew her daughter was going to the countryside. Seeing the knife about to fall on my neck, I couldn't help but laugh. "Hey, look at what you're saying." "If it's okay, I can't come over," Zhou Fengxia said with a smile. "However, there's one more thing. I did come over today. This child is a relative from my mother's side and signed up to go to the countryside a while ago. Well, even though I've already reported my name, you can't make it difficult for me." Zhou Fengxia gave her a sidelong glance and said, "Hey, look at you. Am I such a naive person? We signed up, but for those who go to the countryside, can we still be picky? Do you think so?" Zhou Fengxia pulled the aunt of the Educated Youth Office and quietly pushed a big unity card over. "Hey, look at what you're saying, what's nitpicking? We haven't even allocated territory here yet." The aunt calmly put on the money and smiled. "What's your name, little girl?" "Zhou Tingting." "Come on, I'll look for it." Half a minute later, as expected, he found it and said, "Oh, we haven't allocated any space yet. I see that there are still 2 people missing in the northeast. Why don't you go over there?" The news from the Educated Youth Office can be considered well-informed, and one can know almost everything about which place is prosperous and where the atmosphere is good. Therefore, some people who cannot avoid going to the countryside will give some money to the staff here, to some extent, to take care of them. This is also a tacit agreement among everyone. Cheng. Zhou Tingting also smiled. "Thank you very much, auntie." "Thank you, you water-spirited little girl. You look so charming." This is just lying when she opens her eyes, and Zhou Tingting doesn't care either. The original owner has been poor for so long, coupled with a lack of food and clothing, her small body is as dry as a bean sprout. Now it's a bit ugly and dry, but it's okay. She'll take care of herself, sooner or later. "So, auntie, can I register for my sister?" "Sign up for sister." The aunt was taken aback for a moment, and Zhou Tingting immediately explained, "Actually, my name was also registered by my stepfather on my behalf. In theory, it should be possible for me to register for my sister. Is that okay?" The aunt of the Educated Youth Office was in a dilemma on the face, but she screamed wildly in her heart. Why not? Heaven and earth have a conscience. It's so difficult to complete the task now. One by one. The location of going to the countryside. Auntie was a bit uncertain, so she saw Zhou Tingting's righteous words and said, "My sister said, she was born to contribute to the cause of our country in this lifetime, and she must go to the most difficult places to demonstrate her life value. I think the northwest is good. The wind and sand are everywhere, so planting trees and afforestation can be considered waste utilization." Jiqing ban auntie. Sure, she closed her eyes and her heart turned red, and she reported it. Mind her, let's talk about the trouble later. Anyway, it will be difficult to think about it after publishing this booklet. Watching the aunt of the educated youth office handle everything, Zhou Tingting was happy. Adhering to the principle of, the goose flies by and the thief never leaves empty, Zhou Tingting raised her palm and smiled. "So, auntie, what about the subsidy for going to the countryside?" This time, my aunt was very sensible and directly bought both. "Look, there are also train tickets and other things inside. The subsidy in the northeast corner is less, 20 yuan, while in the northwest it is more, 50 yuan. From the perspective of money alone, it can be seen how difficult the conditions in the northwest are." Zhou Tingting was satisfied and overjoyed. "Thank you, auntie. Then I'll leave first." Before leaving, I didn't forget to kindly remind her, "Could you please remind her before she leaves? I'm afraid she doesn't know." Jiqing ban auntie. To be honest, who offended this girl is really unlucky. Sweet and ruthless, this girl can accomplish great things. Okay, then the day after tomorrow, don't forget your own train number." Zhou Tingting waved the envelope in her hand and said, "Don't worry, auntie. I promise I won't forget it." After leaving the educated youth office, Zhou Fengxia glanced at the position assigned by Zhou Tingting and silently noted it down. Zhou Tingting thought for a moment and said, "Auntie, do you still want the furniture over there? After all the houses have been sold, and the things inside theoretically belong to the family." Zhou Fengxia waved her hand and said, "I don't want it anymore. You can watch and tidy it up. Her family doesn't lack that little money. Besides, if they can do anything to oppress their children, the whole family must be full of ruthless people. Such scumbags, she still finds use things dirty." With Zhou Fengxia's words, Zhou Tingting's heart was at ease. Zhou Tingting knows how to repay her kindness. Her original enemies only dealt with Yuan, but Jian also had to follow suit. His job was all obtained from the work of the original owner's biological father. Chapter 4. The Bashi of Black Eating Black. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I want to go for free and dream. Whatever you eat, you have to spit it out for me. Aunt Zhou, you are a kind-hearted person. In that case, let me tell you one more thing. You have been keeping an eye on the work in the steel plant workshop lately, and my stepfather is not a good person. I plan to get him down, and then the available space. Nature is for those who have an eye for the sky to get it first." She first woke up Zhou Fengxia and asked her to prepare. If the rent had been settled and Zhou Fengxia didn't have the goodwill to help her first, she wouldn't have said that. But if someone extends an olive branch first and picks it up themselves, and still benefits, there is no reason not to repay. Zhou Fengxia really doesn't know what to say. This little girl is really bright and elegant, able to handle things. "Miss, don't worry, auntie remembers your kindness, don't worry." Farewell to Zhou Fengxia and her daughter. Zhou Tingting openly put things in her pocket, but in fact, she had already put the money and those 2 envelopes into the space. After walking for a while, Zhou Tingting became more and more remote, and finally, she arrived at a dead end. Zhou Tingting stopped and said, "Come out, why are you still following me?" Yo, the little rascal put his hands in his pockets and showed a lewd expression. "Are you quite clever, little girl? If you're sensible, just hand over the money in your hand and let's pretend we haven't met before." After speaking, he paused and said, "Otherwise. The threat is beyond words." However, Zhou Tingting's gaze flickered. This money is too broad. Is it for selling jobs, houses, or subsidies for educated youth going to the countryside? She pretended to be afraid and said, I don't understand what you're saying. What money? I don't know. Still pretending, the little rascal approached 2 steps. I saw you come out of the educated youth office. The envelope in your hand is the subsidy given by the educated youth office, right? If you... Oh, subsidy money, it's a small matter. Before the little rascal could finish speaking, Zhou Tingting lifted her foot. There was no strength left in this kick, and the man was unprepared. He was kicked directly into the wall of the alley, making a loud noise. As the little rascal fell off the wall also rustled down. Zhou Tingting walked over and stepped on the little rascal, saying slowly, robbery, give me all the valuable things on your body, otherwise. Little rascal. 10 minutes later, after scraping the contents of the little rascal's body, Zhou Tingting walked briskly away from the dead end. Only the little ruffian in shorts was left holding his arms trembling. Well, everything she's doing now is just right. Robbery is such a thing, and whoever has the ability will succeed. Her skills are inferior to those of others, I can't blame her. The next time will naturally be a big procurement, and we will all go to the countryside. It's hard to say anything else, at least these vouchers will have to be spent. Except for the grain subsidy provided by the Educated Youth Office, which is nationwide, and the one provided by Zhou Fengxia, which is basically only available locally. Leaving the local area, that's just a piece of waste paper, useless. But it's okay, after buying it, it's piled up in her villa space and can still be taken away without any waste. Another weapon for self-defense is bare-handed, which cannot compare to wielding a machete. It's better to have some cold weapons by your side. Never underestimate the wickedness of human nature. With a plan, action becomes much faster. First, I ran to the supply and marketing cooperative and spent all the tickets in my hand. As I walked, my left and right hands were piled up, and I found a secluded corner with no one around. Zhou Tingting even entered the space with people and things. Placing the purchased items on the open space, Zhou Tingting began to explore the place. The small villa has 2 floors in total. The first floor is the kitchen, living room, and storage room, which is not much different from modern times. Opening the refrigerator, there was still a plethora of ingredients and grains piled up inside. Looking at the apple on top, Zhou Tingting took it out with a click, and the sweet juice instantly captured her heart. Although it's just the contents of this refrigerator, she's not greedy either. As long as she has it, she can fill the rest up bit by bit on her own. The storage room was also filled with things, and what surprised her the most was that there were still toilet paper inside. Thank goodness, it really saved my life. The second floor is the living space, bedroom and bathroom, with everything inside. Even the bed is a brand new princess bed. If it weren't for the urgency of time, she would have taken a shower and slept soundly on the princess bed. Zhou Tingting turned around, her face full of surprise. Speaking of which, her life in the previous life was not good either. She had been living in an orphanage since I remember it, and was accustomed to being alone. However, due to her innate strength, she didn't have the ability to be bullied. As she grew up, she entered society and became the most inconspicuous among all the people. I just didn't expect to have this kind of life experience with just a few books. Zhou Tingting clenched her fist and said, "Don't worry, my lord. If I owe you anything, I will recover it 1,000 times for you." Simply placing the items, Zhou Tingting immediately went out for the next round of shopping. Although there were many items in the space, in this era of scarce resources, if she had more things in her hands, her heart would be more secure. Classify and pack the things briefly, and Zhou Tingting dragged 2 huge luggage to the post office. The location for going to the countryside has been determined, and adhering to the principle of the army not moving and food and forage being the first, Zhou Tingting feels that she has done nothing wrong. There are many scattered things prepared, all of which are obvious. Since we are going to the countryside, we need to focus on the surface. Anyway, there's no shortage of a few yuan for this express delivery now. And Zhou Tingting's eyes flickered, and as she left this place, she had to create a brand new persona for herself. After all, when going out, identity is given by oneself. The person at the post office was stunned and they saw Zhou Tingting walking in with a bag in each hand. This. Send something. 5 minutes later, Zhou Tingting left the post office. After a tiring day, she ordered 2 dishes and 1 soup at a state-owned restaurant, just a bowl of rice. After sweeping away everything, she patted her butt and went home. If you want to get some weapons or something, wait until tomorrow to find time and slowly search for them. Returning to her residence, the lock outside had already been opened. Zhou Tingting pushed the door but did not push it. It looks like it's locked from inside. Knock and knock, one of the few polite lines, open the door. The family was having a lively meal, but the sound of Zhou Tingting knocking on the door turned a deaf ear. It's not that Zhou Tingting insists on being so polite, it's mainly because she's thinking that this house already belongs to someone else, and it's not good to do a lot of damage. Chapter 5 Zhou Tingting. A bit polite, but not much. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The little chubby man ate a mouthful of oil, chattering his lips as he listened to Zhou Tingting's knocking on the door, feeling proud in his heart. Tell you to be so arrogant today. Look, we're going to be camping on the streets soon, can we still become arrogant? Humph. Big sister is right, we should let this despicable person suffer a bit and keep a good memory. Shouting loudly, let's not open the door for this lowly person, but let her endure it to death. You have the ability to let her in. Damn it, let her sleep on the street today. Dare to hit me. This bastard. The voice was uncontrollable, even across the yard, Zhou Tingting could hear the little chubby man shouting. Zhou Tingting. Great, her fighting soul is burning brightly. At the same time, he silently recited in his heart, apologizing to Aunt Zhou. If he wants to live in this house well, he probably needs to add another door. She kicked up and half of the door flew, leaving the remaining half unsteady and hanging on the wall. Zhou Tingting stood at the door, like a demon. The person sitting in the main room eating was stunned. Especially Xiaotian, who was unlucky enough to be hit in the head by shattered sawdust, is now lying on the ground, half of her face buried in the rice, dizzy and unaware of her life or death. Zhou Tingting took 3 steps at once and rushed to the front of everyone, without hesitation lifting the dining table. He grabbed the little chubby man's collar with his back hand and said, "Is your mother dead? Is that how you teach children? Opening and closing your mouth are all despicable, bitch. Does that sound good? It's okay if your mother dies. You call me sister, and I have an obligation to teach you." Without hesitation, Zhou Tingting swung her arms and slapped little Pengduan's face twice. The crisp sound of the voice made Zhou Tingting feel at ease. Li Halian is going crazy. You little slut, stop it for me, Jin Bao. Are you okay, Jin Bao? She tore at Zhou Tingting with her hands, but Zhou Tingting didn't show any courtesy to her. She slapped her back and said, "And you're not a good bird either. I really owe you. I taught the young and the old. There's not a single good thing in the whole family." After speaking, Zhou Tingting slapped Xinjian, who had been pretending to be dead next to her. Xinjian. He couldn't believe it and said, "I didn't do anything, did I?" Zhou Tingting said confidently, "It's because you didn't do anything that I have to spank you even more." After speaking, another big mouth appeared, symmetrical on both sides, and Zhou Tingting felt relieved in her heart. As a man, my mother and child were beaten up and didn't dare to fart. I didn't take responsibility and deserve to be whipped. The main focus is on indiscriminate attacks, killing everyone equally. Zhou Tingting wandered around the kitchen and came out with a kitchen knife. Everyone. Is she crazy? Even Li Halian felt a slight cramp in her calves at this moment. Leaving behind a mess, Zhou Tingting let out a cold snort and Xiaotian left. Sure enough, in the face of absolute strength, all conspiracies and schemes are paper tigers. Not obedient. I've beaten your teeth all over the ground. Before closing the door, Zhou Tingting stood at the door and spoke harshly, if anyone bothers me to sleep, I don't mind killing fish and getting caught. Anyway, I'm going to the countryside. I'm not doing well, no one can think of it. Li Halian trembled all over, and now she wished she could just die of anger. Zhou Tingting looked at Li Halian and thought about finding something to do for her. I want to go to the countryside. You make me 2 sets of clothes. Whatever others prepare, you also have to prepare for me. Otherwise, your son. She paused, smiled, and the threat almost overflowed. I don't mind teaching him more about how to be a good person, even though he is a lowly person. Teach him well, and maybe he can still be a person when he grows up. Perhaps sensing that her threat was not yet in place, Zhou Tingting brought everyone along equally. I'm like this anyway. If anyone wants me to have a tough last 2 days here, then we might as well not have any more. Her face was calm, but it made people tremble from the bottom of their hearts. Everyone had no doubt that every word Zhou Tingting said now was true. Bang, the door has closed. Li Halian looked at the door and couldn't figure out why Zhou Tingting, who used to be known for beating and scolding, suddenly had such a big personality change. She thought so and just murmured out loud. Xiaotian lay on the ground, wiping away the rice crumbs from her face, her eyes numb, and her brain suddenly hurt. Upon hearing this, he said softly, if I lose my job, I still have to go to the countryside. Who should I leave it on? Who wouldn't go crazy? Li Halian. It makes sense. She was speechless and even felt that the annoying stepdaughter in front of her was a bit brainy. Just Li Halian said to Nahun, didn't you faint? Xiaotian got up from the ground in a fit of anger. At first, she almost screamed and knocked out, but she wasn't stupid either. Seeing something was wrong, could she still stand up from the ground and get a few more bites? The strength of Zhou Tingting's dead girl's hand is not just for fun. With that kick, her stomach is still hurting. As expected, my stepmother didn't have many good things. She was so miserable. Li Halian scolded herself and didn't forget to bring her along. She stood up and fiercely gouged out Li Halian, you're despicable. Li Halian closed her eyes, and these days are really unbearable. The whole family, young and old, are bullying her. Zhou Tingting spoke up, and even Li Halian cursed her for having sores on the soles of her feet and pus flowing from her mouth. The work that needs to be done must be done, and the money that needs to be spent should not be reduced at all. The next day, Li Halian bought a set of things for Zhou Tingting based on the minimum standard of going to the countryside in this alley. Except for the 2 clothes that Zhou Tingting requested by name, the rest are those that can be saved. Looking at the obvious cut corners, Zhou Tingting, who had been out for a day, smiled silently. I reluctantly took these things down. She is in a good mood and has found good things. She doesn't argue with this company. For the last meal of the evening, the family sat together, even maintaining a superficial harmony was enough. Except for Zhou Tingting, who was genuinely happy, the rest, even with a smile on their face, were even more unsightly than crying. Let's eat. Zhou Tingting stood up and said, I won't eat anymore. Looking at you guys, it turns me off. After speaking, Zhou Tingting lifted her foot and walked away. Although the rest of the people were thrown back in anger, the thought of her going to the countryside tomorrow filled their hearts with joy. Even Xiaotian felt the slaps on her face no longer hurt. A few slaps for a decent job, it's worth it. Zhou Tingting's demeanor is useless now. When she goes to the countryside and becomes a mud-legged child, she will have to endure it. A table of food was swept away by the wind and clouds. At that time, Zhou Tingting locked the door with her back hand, and after entering the space, she happily took a shower, set the alarm clock, and fell asleep. At 3 o'clock in the morning. With the sound of the alarm clock, Zhou Tingting suddenly became mentally alert. She got up and briefly washed up before opening the refrigerator. Zhou Tingting. Chapter 6. Going to the countryside. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Zhou Tingting. Watching another apple appear in the refrigerator, she rubbed her eyes in disbelief. Huge ecstasy enveloped me. My goodness, what's the difference between this and resource points that can be refreshed? The villa space, with just this refrigerator, she has made a fortune. As long as a person is happy, they have the energy to do anything. Simply filling her stomach, Zhou Tingting made room and started tidying up from her own room. Although there were not many valuable items, she didn't leave a single grain of rice for Shenjian's family. Zhou Tingting decided to empty everything. Strive to work until the mouse comes in to steal something, you'll have to shed 2 tears and throw 2 grains of rice at her. It only took an hour for the whole family to move out, and during this time, it took Zhou Tingting some effort to search for the money hiding place in the house. Besides that, it was simply effortless and stress-free. Watching fish belly white rising from the sky, Zhou Tingting glanced at the alarm clock on the big bed. It was almost 5 o'clock. After 10 minutes of making a fire and cooking noodles, Zhou Tingting had enough to eat and drink. She took away all the pots, bowls, ladles, and bowls with her hands. These things can also be used in the countryside during this period. Shenjian and others slept soundly. Nothing more, Zhou Tingting added ingredients to last night's meal. Looking at a house that was truly impoverished with only walls left, Zhou Tingting nodded in satisfaction, carrying the pitiful little package prepared by Li Halian. Facing the morning glow, Zhou Tingting set off. Go to the countryside and start a new chapter in life. The train hasn't arrived at the station yet, but it's already bustling enough. On the way with her legs crossed, Zhou Tingting felt that Shenjian was useless and couldn't even get a bicycle ticket. Whenever he bought a bicycle. Can't I also suffer a lot less now? I almost got caught up in it. At the train station, there were countless people who bid farewell to their families with tears in their eyes. Zhou Tingting saw it, and although she wanted to pretend not to care, the look in her eyes completely betrayed her. Yes, she really envies it. However, whether it was in her previous life or the one she picked up, her familial bond was very shallow. I haven't seen my parents in my previous life, but in this life it's better not to let that mother come. Without her, her original body might have lived for another 2 years. As she squeezed up all the way, found a seat, and sat down with her buttocks against the chair, Zhou Tingting almost burst into tears. Nima, what's the point of a bit of happiness? Hello, Zhou Tingting looked up at the girl she was chatting with and said, hello. The girl saw that although Zhou Tingting was not very warm-hearted, she was not particularly cold and happy. Hello, my name is Repaying, and I am from the Flower Shorts Brigade who went to the Bears commune in the countryside. How about you? The surrounding air has become quiet. Zhou Tingting was also confused for a moment. Yes, Repaying also wanted to vomit blood. It's the Flower Shorts Brigade, you heard it right. Perhaps Repaying started, and the remaining educated youth also spoke up. I am the Wozigu Brigade of the Dog Bear Commune. The Qingyo Brigade of Mao Commune. The Buffalo Brigade of the Big Black Dog Commune. I am the Red Flag Brigade of Qingshan Commune. After listening to too many strange names, such as Qingshan Commune and Colored Flag Brigade, these 8 characters suddenly caught everyone's attention. The male educated youth was very polite, and after saying these words, he proudly lifted his glasses on the bridge of his nose. That sense of pride instantly turned on everyone's faces. Repaying said, She was also drunk. Looking at the male-educated youth like Dees, she couldn't help but roll her eyes. Whispering softly, "Oh my goodness, I haven't grown any hair behind my buttocks. If I had grown hair, I wouldn't be able to fit him in the carriage anymore. I have to pout my buttocks, lift my head, and moan loudly on the roof." Zhou Tingting, who has sharp ears, said, Pushy. Watching Zhou Tingting smile, Huang Pianran shamelessly spoke up again, "So what, this beautiful girl, what's your name? Where have you been assigned?" Zhou Tingting blinked and said, "Zhou Tingting, I am the Taoyuan Brigade of the Dog-Bear Commune." She also joked with Huang Pianran, "It's not as memorable as the place you went to the countryside." Unexpectedly, Huang Pianran was excited and said, "Oh, you're from the Taoyuan Brigade. We need to take care of you more from now on." Zhou Tingting was puzzled and said, "Are these two battalions closer together?" "That's not true. I assigned the Flower Shorts Brigade, but my grandmother's house is in the Taoyuan Brigade. As soon as I land, everything there will definitely be arranged properly. Going to the countryside is a predetermined fate, but since they are all in the same commune, as long as there is a connection, it is not a big problem to exchange educated youth between the battalions." Zhou Tingting. Looking at Huang Pianran, who had a face full of innocence and was particularly easy to deceive, Zhou Tingting fell silent and said, "You're too narrow-minded. Don't say anything. What's that scary?" Huang Pianran waved her hand, "I feel like old friends at first sight, you must be a good person." Zhou Tingting raised her eyebrows without explanation. "What kind of person is she? Let's wait and see later. It's too early to define now. Human energy is limited, and the train-tearing incident that Zhou Tingting thought had never happened. As for the reason, it was probably due to being smoked by the toilet in the car and losing those secular desires. Huang Pianran has to be suppressed to the point of grinning every time she goes to the bathroom. After returning, he thought he was muttering softly, "When I get to Grandma's house, I definitely have to have a big one." Zhou Tingting. A girl with ambition. I wish you success. But I have to say that Huang Pianran was taught very well at home, but she was coquettish but not arrogant, and seemed to be particularly able to bear hardships. Eggs and white flour mantou were delicious, and wild vegetable dumplings were also delicious. This is a great appetite, even Zhou Tingting has to take it with her. For now, Zhou Tingting still has a good impression of Huang Pianran, and it's good to be a good partner in the future. At least she has a balanced approach, her speech is not unpleasant, and her mouth is sweet and obedient. Okay. The train traveled on the tracks for 3 days and 3 nights, and finally arrived in the northeast. After getting off the train, the two of them were almost dispersed by the crowd, especially Huang Pianran's small figure. If it weren't for Zhou Tingting's quick eyes and quick hands, they would have been swept away. She didn't even know where she was carried by the crowd. Just Huang Pianran innocently stepped on the ground and hung in the air. She said weakly, "Tingting, why don't you put me down first? I'm a bit afraid of heights and I feel like I'm almost breathless." Zhou Tingting. Sorry, I can't breathe. It's not because I'm afraid of heights, but because I grabbed the collar of her fate. The two of them had a lot of things, mainly Huang Pianran's. In order to bribe Zhou Tingting, Huang Pianran, who was already very sensible, stuffed a large handful of big white rabbit milk candy into Zhou Tingting's bag. Zhou Tingting also smiled and accepted Huang Pianran's kindness. Following the crowd out of the crowded train station, as soon as you reach the outside, it becomes a completely different world. Chapter 7. Taoyuan Brigade. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Bashi Brigade, this way. If you go east, there will be all of the Bear Commune on the east side. After walking for more than 10 minutes, Huang Pianran looked at the nearby ox cart and her eyes lit up with excitement. She said, "Tingting, my grandma's family." She jumps up and down like a little potato. I don't know if it's because she's too short or there are too many people. Huang Pianran bounced around, but the others didn't see her. Zhou Tingting thought for a moment and said, otherwise, I'll raise my hand. The two stood together, and Zhou Tingting was half a head taller than Huang Pianran. Huang Pianran nodded excitedly and said, Zhou Tingting raised her hand and waved. Okay, now it stands out among the chickens immediately. The people on the ox cart started to stir up. Led by a slender and agile old lady, they all came down with a hula. Crossing the sea of people, Huang Pianran's eyes were filled with tears. Grandma, a grandmother whom I haven't seen in years, a grandmother that my mother thinks about day and night. Ran. Tears swirled in her eyes, and Huang Pianran was ready to embrace the old lady. Then, the old lady accurately hugged Zhou Tingting. Tears welled up in my eyes. Woo, Grandma is so well behaved. She has grown taller and taller, and I can't even recognize her anymore. Zhou Tingting. Huang Pianran said, what? Oh, let Grandma take a closer look. The old lady took a step back and looked at Zhou Tingting. Okay, it looks like you're following your dad and growing taller. In one sentence, it added insult to injury to Huang Pianran's gloomy mood. Zhou Tingting stood awkwardly in the same spot, and Huang Pianran was about to turn into a pufferfish in anger. Grandma, I am the one who is the pufferfish. Grandma's family. The old lady paused for a moment, glanced at Zhou Tingting, and then at Huang Pianran standing next to her. Well, now I can recognize it. This girl and her mother are simply carved from the same mold. Especially the head. Grandma admitted her mistake, it seems like she followed her mother. Same little potatoes. After a farce, Huang Pianran's grandmother's family was also very enthusiastic about Zhou Tingting. The young lady who walked the bar is also an educated youth. Meeting her is fate. With this black dragon, Huang Pianran's tears were suppressed, and when they met, their tears turned into smiles and smiles. The group walked to the ox cart of the Taoyuan Brigade. The captain was a young old man in his 50s, with jet black hair and a lively appearance. Oh, here we go. Zhou Tingting. Hello, I am an educated youth from the countryside. I know, the little old man glanced at Zhou Tingting and said with a smile, the girl is beautiful. Can she do work? Although she spoke a bit bluntly, she didn't mean to offend. Zhou Tingting nodded and said, yes, I have a lot of strength, but I'm a bit lazy. I don't know if our team has any lighter tricks. Captain Jian Jiangwo. He was speechless, and coincidentally, even the educated youth had not come yet. Jian Jiangwo simply followed Zhou Tingting's advice and said, at such a young age, why not strive for progress? Captain, I have a strong desire to make progress. The key is that I have my small body set up here. Instead of waiting until I go to work in the countryside to hold everyone back, it's better to put the ugly words ahead of me. Zhou Tingting smiled and said, I'll find a convenient one, and it'll save you trouble, right? Jian Jiangwo. I really believe in your evil. However, at least he is an honest person. Jian Jiangwo put his ugly words before him, there are also light and frugal jobs, but the pay is low. If you want to fill your stomach, you need to be mentally prepared. However, looking at the clothes and attire, it doesn't seem like the family is struggling. Just looking at her personal condition and feeling that the conditions at home are probably not much better. Zhou Tingting nodded. When she went to the countryside, she had already planned to create a wealthy persona for herself. If conditions permit, she even wants to move out and live alone. Fewer people mean less trouble. After all, she really can't live in poverty. As for whether there will be redness disease coming up and rushing to find fault. Zhou Tingting bluntly stated that if she disagrees, she will do it. You can't live a difficult life on your own just to make others not jealous, can you? Not possible. If she hasn't cleaned up and behaved well in the future, it must be because her strength is not good. It's time to reflect on herself. Why did she survive in a different world, and her strength is still so low? Have you worked hard in this lifetime? Okay. Okay, then just sit and wait. Jian Jiangwo looked at Zhou Tingting, not feeling bored, mainly because the girl was bright and said whatever she wanted. As for educated youth, if you don't want to help, just ask not to cause trouble. In the next 20 minutes, all the educated youth from Taoyuan Brigade have arrived. Jian Jiangwo took out a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket, with his head aligned. He picked up a small whip and threw it in the air. Let's go home. The people on the road are all wilting, mainly because they are in a bad mood. Stepping into the countryside from the city, their mood and senses will definitely be different. Zhou Tingting is fine. In her previous life, city people would come to rural leisure together in groups of 3 or 5 as soon as they rested, hoping to experience a different kind of life. Now in this environment, it can only be said that the mountains and waters are beautiful and the air is fresh, even the wild flowers on the road are particularly charming and lovely. Zhou Tingting likes this place, especially when she looks at the endless small mountains around her. The joy on her body almost turns into substance and overflows from her eyes. There are mountains and water, and by the mountains and by the water, you can try your luck with food and drink. She still wants to eat something rare. Of course, it would be perfect if she didn't go down to work. The cart swayed and swayed for over 2 hours, and Zhou Tingting felt her buttocks going numb. Especially this small and skinny person, with no flesh or two all over his body, jolted and bumped against his bones. It was almost fatal. Just as Zhou Tingting was about to explode, the ox cart finally arrived. Passing through a pine forest, what caught the eye was a huge locust tree, estimated to be as thick as 3 people hugging each other. Standing there with lush branches and leaves. This is the entrance to the village. Jian Jiangwo smiled and wanted to be proud. Our Taoyuan Brigade is located near the mountains and rivers. As long as we work hard and quickly, we won't be hungry at all. Even the Shandong commune is very close, he said. However, there are few farmers who go to the commune. The educated youth are picky about their mouths, and some families with good conditions occasionally go to the commune state-owned restaurant for a tooth ceremony and a good meal. He drove a group of educated youth off the ox cart and said, "Let's go. I'll take you over and take a look at the Educated Youth Academy now." When educated youth go to the countryside, they all wish to bring their big and small packages with them, so they all have their hands full. The bumpy road was full of resentment, and now watching the captain take the ox cart away and let them walk on their legs, I feel a bit unhappy. Chapter 8. The Demon Moth in the Academy of Education. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Where's the ox cart? The first person to make a fuss was a bespectacled male educated youth, whose face was full of displeasure, and exhaustion and resentment were about to overflow. The captain didn't even lift his eyelids, but the old man was there. Cows have been working hard all the way, shouldn't they go home and eat some good grass and drink some water? Male educated youth. He gritted his teeth and said, "What about us?" The captain pretended to be confused with clarity and said, "If you want to drink water, you can wait until you reach the Educated Youth Academy to drink it. Don't hesitate, let's go." He was also hungry and rushed home to eat. "No way, Captain. You need to get the cart back. We have to take all these old things and they're all exhausted." Zhou Tingting looked at all of this and felt that the male educated youth was a bit confused. On the first day he arrived at the brigade, he was facing the captain. This is not something that smart people can do. She has made up her mind to stay away from this educated youth in the future. The captain paid no attention at all and walked forward with his head down. The educated youth hesitated for a moment, but unexpectedly stopped one after another, looking quite like they were huddling together to keep warm. It is inevitable to pressure the captain to get the ox cart out. Zhou Tingting was stunned, and the captain couldn't believe it. What were all these educated youth thinking? It is said that strong dragons do not overpower local snakes. When they arrive in the countryside, they must first recognize their own weight and weight. Think again about whether or not to confront the captain. These young and immature ones are really tiger-like. The corner of her clothes was grabbed, and Huang Pianran gave a glance to Zhou Tingting and said loudly to the team leader, "Uncle, my grandma knows the way, so I'll go with Zhou Jiqing first." Zhou Tingting nodded obediently and said, "I'll go with Huang Jiqing." The captain is now looking at Huang Pianran and Zhou Tingting with loving eyes. Pianran is truly the child who walked out from here, obedient and sensible. There is also this little educated youth named Tingting, although her words are a bit lazy. But I can't resist being aware of current affairs. Go, go, go. Huang Pianran and Zhou Tingting quickly fled the scene. Zhou Tingting had not much in her hands, and when Huang Pianran's family separated some of them, her hands were even empty. Compared to Huang Pianran's big and small bags, it looks quite pitiful. "You haven't brought anything with you." Zhou Tingting looked calm and said, "The journey is far away. I thought about bringing it over and had a hard time, so I sent the things in advance." Huang Pianran nodded, while her grandmother's family was still muttering, "You're just a stubborn donkey, carved from the same mold as your mother." The big stubborn donkey gave birth to a small stubborn donkey. "Grandma," Huang Pianran said awkwardly. Grandma stared and said, "What are you doing? I can't even say a word." Huang Pianran looked at her grandmother like this and felt happy in her heart. She even made up her mind not to live at her house anymore. Her mother was right in saying that distance can create beauty. She lives at her grandmother's house. At first, her uncle and aunt didn't say much, but over time, there will definitely be friction. Whether it's big or small, it's difficult for grandma to get caught in the middle. Why not just stay at the Educated Youth Academy and occasionally go over for a meal? Everyone is happy. After arguing all the way, I quickly arrived at the Educated Youth Academy. There are many educated youth living in the Educated Youth Courtyard, which is a huge courtyard surrounded by earth walls. It looks like it should cover more than half an acre. Not to mention anything else, the safety of this earthen wall is still very guaranteed. Zhou Tingting was not idle on her way here. She was looking around the wasteland, thinking about moving out and living. When the time came, she would be free to eat alone and not have to worry about anything. The Educated Youth Academy caught the eye, with many people inside, but they turned a blind eye to the two people who had come from afar. Zhou Tingting understood clearly that this was Xiaotian Wen. But she doesn't take this approach. She didn't feel any awkward either. She took out a biscuit from her pocket and said, "Do you want to eat it?" Huang Pianran said, To be honest, looking at these educated youth, she feels a bit overwhelmed now. "Let's eat," Zhou Tingting urged. "Can they ignore us? Can they also ignore the captain?" "Wait, don't take 10 minutes, the captain will definitely come." Huang Pianran thought for a moment, and what she said made sense. Grandma and her family felt uncomfortable as they continued to work, and Huang Pianran sent them back to do whatever they needed to do. Although it's not the busiest time for farmers now, every household still has a lot of work to do. Feeding chickens and ducks, tending to the family's private plots, doing laundry and cooking, tidying up winter goods, the family really has nothing to do, and can even carry hoes to remote areas such as the foot of the mountain to cultivate land. At first, Grandma didn't want to leave until Huang Pianran reached out her fist and gestured solemnly twice. Grandma understood instantly and said, "All right, let's go first. We'll cook delicious food at home tonight. You bring Zhou Jiqing over with you. This week, the educated youth are good. She needs to arrange for her granddaughter to have her friends first." Everyone has left, leaving only Zhou Tingting and Huang Pianran face. After the two of them stared at each other with big eyes for a moment, Zhou Tingting extended an olive branch and took out an oil paper packet from the bag, which contained peach pastries. Do you want to eat it? Huang Pianran wanted to say she wouldn't eat, but her stomach growled. Eat. When Captain Jian Jiangwo arrived with the resentment of the educated youth, he saw two pitiful people squatting at the entrance of the educated youth point. Jian Jiangwo frowned and said, "Why don't you go in?" Zhou Tingting didn't apply eye drops immediately, just smiled and said, "I don't know the regulations. I'm waiting for you to come and arrange it." Huang Pianran picked up the package and nodded like a chicken pecking at rice, "Right, right." The two of them spoke lightly, but who doesn't know what's going on inside? Especially Jian Jiangwo has a thorough understanding of this group of educated youth. It was just that the people inside wanted to take Zhou, which caused the two of them to have a hard time. I just didn't expect their temperaments to be so soft, they didn't even argue. The captain has to bring two educated youth over a year, arguing twice a year, and he's used to it. How could he be so peaceful this time? Jian Jiangwo felt it was unlikely, on the contrary, he felt a bit of drumming in his heart. The current tranquility is more like a prelude to a storm. The educated youth behind them watched the two of them bump into a wall in the educated youth courtyard and sneered. They were still resentful because they had just been in public and had not moved forward or retreated together. Now that I have the opportunity to mock, I naturally refuse to let it go and deliberately mutter loudly, "How capable am I of coming over early? I didn't even enter the door when I closed it, it's just laughing to death." Zhou Tingting's sharp gaze immediately locked onto the young educated man who was whispering. Women, short in height, with fried dough twists braids, have a big hole in their mouth. Okay, remember, when there's a chance, she will definitely face it and laugh back. She, ordinary and unremarkable Zhou Tingting, has the greatest trait of being strong, and on par with her, she has a small heart. Who would offend her? If she doesn't retaliate, she can remember it for a lifetime. Chapter 9. What the old lady said, "I'll kill you." You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhou Tingting ignored her, and Huang Pianran didn't say a word. She was mainly clumsy and usually wouldn't move her tongue. Speaking sarcastically on the train was just to attract Zhou Tingting's attention. The relationship between the two is quite good now, and it is inevitable for them to be together in the future. She doesn't need to have the same opinion as a barking dog. If this dog evolves later and becomes capable of biting people, Huang Pianran frowned and thought with a hint of melancholy, then don't blame yourself for being merciless when it comes to taking action. After all, her life motto is that if she can move her hand, she won't argue. The two remained silent, and the captain was too lazy to pay attention to these cautious thoughts. Instead, the female educated youth who appeared to be provoking became a clown. Don't even work anymore. We have new educated youth here. Let's get to know each other better. In the future, when we live under the same roof, we still need to support each other. This is just a passing remark. The captain himself doesn't believe what he says, while the educated youth are very straightforward and refuse to listen. After this period of interaction, the educated youth have also realized that if something happens, as long as it is not brought to light, it will embarrass the brigade and delay production. The captain is too lazy to bother at all. Both sides adhere to this boundary and are very tacit in not touching it. Now seeing the brigade leader coming, one of the educated youth approached with a smile, looking at the group of highly qualified individuals. His name is He-kun, and he is the undisclosed spokesperson of everyone in the Educated Youth Academy. Could you really trouble the captain to come another time? The captain raised his hand. He didn't come here to listen to flattery. Besides, he couldn't understand the flattery of these educated youth. I always feel a strange smell in my ears. Alright, He-jiqing, let's not just talk about those things. Let's see where this little Jiqing lives. The captain interrupted He-kun's flattery, his expression froze for a moment, and he immediately sneered, "Okay. This time going to the countryside, including Zhou Tingting, there are a total of 8 people, 3 male educated youth and 5 female educated youth. The male educated youth was easy to handle, and he Kun pondered, let's live with us. The house over there is quite large. As a result, it was awkward for the female educated youth to come to their side. The Datong Pu could only accommodate 1 more person, and if they squeezed hard, they could still sleep for 3 more. But there are 5 people here. The captain was embarrassed for a moment, but he didn't expect that the educated youth academy was not enough to live in. Isn't there a firewood shed over there? It can also accommodate people. Being able to live is being able to live, and the question is who will live. Compared to normal rooms, they are all occupied. The house where firewood is piled up is already in ruins, and the roof is still leaking. On rainy days, it rains heavily outside and drizzles lightly inside. He Kun made it clear that he wanted to see a joke and shrugged, Captain, I can't do anything about this. Why don't you tell Lu Jiqing? Lu Jiqing's name is Lu Wanwan. Among the female educated youth, she is the person in charge, fair and impartial. I really can't sleep. If I squeeze hard, I'll hold on for an extra 4, and there's still 1 with nowhere to go. There's 1 left. Although dissatisfied with the environment of rural educated youth, no one wants to sleep on the main road in the dark. Therefore, among the later female educated youth, the remaining 3 looked at each other and, with great understanding, gathered together to isolate Zhou Tingting and Huang Pianran. Before the new educated youth could split up internally, the lubricant that brought them together shone brightly. Why? As soon as Lu Wanwan's voice fell, an educated youth with a fried dough twists braid jumped out, and his eyes were about to turn upside down. We were all squeezed to sleep on our own. Why are so many people here? I won't do it. We can only have 1 person in our room, and there are only 4 left. Do whatever you like. This sentence can be said to have caused public anger. What's your dog's name? The captain is still here, and it's your turn to chatter. Isn't it the house of the female educated youth? I'll go live there. It was Gu Shi who had just shouted to Zhou Tingting that was choking. Now she is also leading the way, holding her own package and charging in with a strong and spirited attitude. The people at the Educated Youth Academy were all confused for a moment. After all, it was rare for them to be so tough. By the time the educated youth reacted and stopped them, she had already rushed into the room with something in her arms. Who let you in? I'll just go in. What's wrong? The Educated Youth Academy is still your family's property. This is where we live, so you are not allowed to come in. Oh my God, if you don't let me in, then I won't go in. Those who are capable occupy it. I can go in, that's all because I have the ability. The remaining 2 of them exchanged a glance and rushed in with something in their arms. They finally noticed that the old educated youth were huddled together, and if the new educated youth didn't huddle together, they could be bullied to death by these old people. At such times, we still need to unite and work together towards the outside world. Stinky and shameless, you know you're bullying us young. Who bullied you? Just you. Old woman, oh, who pulled my hair? Damn it, I'll kill you. Captain. He really watched helplessly as this group of people started fighting, from a verbal altercation to a brawl. The bulging veins on the forehead jumped straight. Stop. This can also be considered a groundbreaking experience. In the past, people used to speak up, but who knew they were still taking action now? The captain shouted loudly, but no one paid attention. The resentment accumulated by the educated youth along the way finally erupted completely at this moment. A group of people fought fiercely. The captain went up to fight, but was kicked by some female educated youth. He took 2 steps back and sat down on the ground. Huang Pianran said, She was shocked and quickly stepped forward to help the captain to the corner. The captain's old face turned pale in pain and he said, Stop it. If we continue fighting, it will be terrible. The man looked at each other with a green face. clearly not wanting to cause trouble. The captain looked at this group of weaklings and was so angry that he was about to smoke. He-kun looked embarrassed and said, "We are all female educated youth. We may not be good at getting started, and men and women may not be compatible. If we are misunderstood, we will not be able to clear our minds even if we jump into the Yellow River." After speaking, he stood outside the crowd and shouted at the top of his voice, "Stop fighting, stop fighting." In a panic, someone slapped him in the face and he left angrily. "I can't control it, love doesn't matter." The platoon leader looked bitter and said, "Who can help pull it apart? If we continue to fight, we're afraid we'll lose lives." Huang Pianran thought about it and Zhou Tingting said briefly, "Captain, can you give me 5 centimeters after the fight?" "Here." At this point, let alone 5, he gave even 10, but looking at Zhou Tingting's small figure, he felt that even if he went, it would be a waste of his life. Zhou Tingting nodded, "Not bad, she doesn't like working for free. Go ahead." However, looking at the straightforward appearance of the captain, it is obvious that there will be fewer work points. Next time, we will learn from our mistakes and strive for more. Chapter 10. I want to build a house. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In fact, she didn't want to get involved, but she couldn't bear to live on the train and suffered for several days. Now she was tired and hungry, so she wanted to quickly divide the house, start a fire, cook, and sleep when she was full. Fighting is okay, delaying her meal. Damn, damn, damn. She threw it away and strode up, holding a female educated youth in each hand. After tearing it off, she said, "Be honest, if you fight again, I'll be rude to you." The female educated youth had already turned red in the eye and was pushed away by Zhou Tingting, still feeling a bit dissatisfied. She gave her a blank glance and said, "Dog takes mouse, mind your own business." After finishing speaking, she had to rush in and continue fighting. Zhou Tingting pulled her out and rushed in to separate the fighting crowd. The female educated youth stumbled for 2 steps, barely standing firm. Looking at Zhou Tingting's back, she gritted her teeth and realized that she was a scumbag who meddled in nothing. Not a good thing. Yu Guang caught a glimpse of a piece of wood leaning against the yard, picked it up, rushed over, and was about to smash Zhou Tingting's head downwards. Huang Pianran. Be careful, Tingting. Zhou Tingting had already noticed that her hands were constantly moving, and she made a crisp and agile turn. First, she lifted her leg and kicked away the wood in the hand of the female educated youth, and then kicked away the female educated youth. At the moment when she flew 2 meters backwards and landed on the ground, the academy fell silent for a moment. The remaining people all stopped and took a few steps back, their eyes filled with fear as they looked at Zhou Tingting. Zhou Tingting moved her little body for a while, and her irritable mood became even more irritable due to hunger. She walked up to the female educated youth and said condescendingly, "You're going to kill me, my friend." The scene was under control, and the captain's face was about to turn black. He took a deep breath and said, "Pianran, come and find the barefoot doctor from our team." The female educated youth in that room was knocked unconscious, and the huge pain on her body made her face tingle and her mind clear. Zhou Tingting looked at the female educated youth and suddenly felt that this was the best time to kill the chicken and warn the monkey. The academy was not peaceful, and her desire not to live here became even stronger. Huang Pianran ran away, and the captain covered his sore buttocks and slowly moved. Before taking a few steps, he watched helplessly as Zhou Tingting grabbed the female educated youth who was trying to commit violence by the collar and pulled them up. He raised his hand, and it was a crisp slap in the ear. "Are you quite capable? Are you still thinking of smashing me to death?" The female educated youth shook her head in panic and said, "No, no, it's not me. I didn't mean to do it, I dare not do it anymore." "You didn't mean it." Zhou Tingting smiled, really a coward. He had the ability to do bad things, but didn't have the courage to admit it. "Didn't you do it?" You didn't mean to do it. Oh my, that wood has become sperm, has legs, and ran into your hands on its own. The female educated youth's face turned pale, and the cold sweat on her forehead fell down one after another. She had no ability to show off and fight with others, but this time she got angry and her eyes turned red, which was why she did such an irrational thing. Zhou Tingting didn't care. She grabbed the clothes of the female educated youth and made her stand crooked like a soft noodle, twitching her mouth with just one sentence. The crisp sound of applause spread in the small courtyard, and the educated youth were as quiet as chickens, afraid to fart. Especially when she first arrived here, she followed Zhou Tingting's clamor for care. Looking at this scene, her back was soaked in cold sweat. Thinking of her arrogant expression just now, she wished she could go back and give herself a few bites. Can this person be provoked? The captain looked at Zhou Tingting and felt a little scared, but he bravely stepped forward and grabbed her wrist. Enough, Zhou Jiqing, if we continue to fight, we will really lose our lives, he said. Zhou Tingting also felt that it was almost over, but she didn't let go. She turned her head and said seriously to the team leader, I almost died just now. If it weren't for my good skills and quick reflexes, with that big stick, I would have died like playing with it. The captain fell silent, indeed. The first thing to do is to flirt with someone. Besides, Zhou Jiqing was still instructed by herself to come forward and fight with kindness. However, she fell ill and swung the thick wooden stick at the person's head. No, just thinking about Jian Jiangwo makes me feel like my cold sweat is coming down. If Zhou Tingting doesn't have such good skills, that stick would smash the porcelain, and this is the rhythm of causing death. Think about it, getting slapped these few times is also something she deserves, at least it can improve her memory. Forget it, just give me face and let go. Zhou Tingting. I want to have a job division. Face is not worth the cost of work. The captain choked and said, okay, then I'll transfer 20 of her job positions to you. Zhou Tingting decisively let go, that's pretty much it. She looked up at a group of quiet educated youth like chickens, and suddenly a smile appeared on her lips. Why don't you fight anymore? She hasn't started yet. Stop fighting. The female educated youth was covered in colorful clothes and was in pain, but at this moment, she dared not say a word and shook her head hurriedly. I really don't want to fight anymore. Zhou Tingting looked at the captain and said, are my 5 work points still counted? Captain. Count. Huang Pianran called for the barefoot doctor from the village. He came over to take a look and said it was all skin injuries, but the female educated youth really felt like she was going to die, crying and howling. The captain had no choice but to get a cart and take it to the commune clinic. At this moment, when we divided the room, the educated youth spoke like clams and didn't say a word. Zhou Tingting glanced at the door of the house where the female educated youth lived. As soon as you stand over, you can smell the foul smell floating inside. There are also some female comrades who are not particular, and coupled with the fact that it is still hot in summer and there are many people, the taste is definitely not much better. Zhou Tingting left decisively and arrived at the firewood room to see that the Kong was in good condition, except for a patch on top of her head. If she had nothing to do at night, she could count the stars. Captain, can we educated youth build houses in the countryside? Zhou Tingting was not the first to propose. Yes, we can divide the homestead for you. You can build the house, and when you return to the city, it will belong to the brigade. There are plenty of vacant land in the Taoyuan brigade. As long as the educated youth are willing to build it, they can build it. When they find a way to return to the city, these are all owned by the brigade, and they will pick up a house for nothing. Moreover, building a house also requires manpower, so it's not a loss at all. Then I'll get a house. She doesn't want to stay in this place for a whole day. She has no privacy at all, not to mention that living here is full of demons and monsters, with no safe owner. She doesn't want to open her eyes all day and just listen to people arguing. She was afraid that she would get so angry that she punched the courtyard wall. Now it's similar to retirement life, working at sunrise and resting at sunset, it's so beautiful. However, when Zhou Tingting said she was going to build a house, all the educated youth who ordered it breathed a sigh of relief and left well. Living with such a person makes me feel really scared. Huang Pianran silently raised her hand and said, "What's that? I also want to build a house."